Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Pleased to be joined by my good friend and esteemed colleague, my man Jeff Howe, and also a member of the On Texas Football family. Except he's a national champion. My man Marcus Myers is joining us here as well. This edition of On Texas Football brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. We'll tell you more about them coming up a little bit later on. But gentlemen, Sark has had some red zone issues recently here at Texas, and they seem to have become even more glaring versus Ohio State. Now, you got Ohio State early coming up this season in game two, but the last two times you've played Ohio State, the Longhorns 1 of 4 scoring touchdowns in their red zone opportunities, and a lot of very disastrous and memorable, for bad reasons, go-to-go situations for the Longhorns. Of course, the famous toss play in a go-to-go situation that Longhorn fans have criticized as being one of the worst play calls they've seen from Sark. There's also the fumble return for a touchdown as well that we've seen. And then most recently this season, Sark himself even said on the Get Got podcast, with Marshawn Lynch, that the quarterback sneak that he called against Ohio State in a go-to-go situation, maybe one of the worst play calls that he had all season long, because he felt like Ohio State read it from the jump. So even Sark himself has admitted that against Ohio State, he's had some issues in go-to-go situations, and obviously it's been evident to us. So we thought we'd play kind of the Monday morning quarterback here and not only critique Sark in those situations, but also suggest some play calls that we'd like to see from Sark in those go-to-go situations, maybe against Ohio State coming up this season. Let me just say this, guys. First of all, it would be easy. The easy thing is, Jeff, to open it up, you'd like to just have a guy, whether a running back or whether that be a quarterback. Hell, sometimes it can even be a receiver that is a weapon in those situations for you in a go-to-go situation, someone that gives you an overwhelming advantage. They hadn't really had that since Bijan. Bijan was kind of the last red zone. Bijan and Rojo, take that back. Both of them. They were really good in red zone. I always say you got to have kind of a violent twitch down there in that area, and those guys had it. They hadn't had a guy like that, so those go-to-go situations have been difficult for Texas recently.
Yeah, and one of the issues that I've had with Sark's kind of red zone play, well, there's really two. One is finding an identity and really honing in on it and cultivating it. The other thing is the sequencing in some of the red zone situations, specifically the goal to go. And what strikes me is I go back to the goal line stand that Oklahoma had in the 2023 game where you had first and goal at the 1 and didn't score. And then, the Ohio State possession that ended with the Jack Sawyer strip sack and the fumble return. Both those second down calls were atrocious. And they were both toss plays. We all remember the toss play to Trey Wisner, Rod, which you referenced, but there was also a toss to Jonathan Brooks on second and goal from the 1 that went nowhere in the Oklahoma game. And it just seems like maybe some of those early downs where you're just not throwing your best pitch at that point. So it's almost like you become a pitcher that gets behind in the count. And now what does a pitcher do when he gets behind in the count? Now you got to throw fastballs. Now you are predictable. So I just think the early goal-to-go play calling from Sark, you can't afford to waste those. Like, you need to have your best options. One of the things that I really liked, you go back to that Oklahoma situation, I loved the tunnel screen call to Xavier Worthy.
Yeah, I remember that.
I didn't like the fact that you didn't make it, but I liked the call. I just didn't like the fact that you backed yourself into a corner to where you had to call that on 4th down. If you called that on 3rd down, you still got some margin for error, but because you, for all intents and purposes, wasted 1st and 2nd down, now you had no margin for error on 3rd and 4th down. So I know, Marcus, you and I have talked about that a little bit too. I just think the sequencing from Sark needs to be better in those situations.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. I agree. I think, from a sequencing standpoint, you want to see something that gives you more of a chance if it doesn't work out, right? And especially earlier in the downs. I think we can maybe all agree, or at least the three of us for sure, that we'd like to see them go ahead and just scrap the toss play altogether. I don't think I need to see that one again in really any of the scenarios. But I think you both nailed it, right? Is finding something you feel really good about early on, so that you still give yourself an opportunity. And if it's one of your more traditional type of run plays, I'd rather see that happen on 1st down, but it be something quick not a slow developing play, so that there's maybe less of a chance of you losing yardage. And then if you do get into second down, if you haven't been able to punch it in, then you give yourself maybe more of a run pass option. And that's where maybe I'd like to see something where it's a quick rollout, to Archer's right, something he's comfortable with, but it gives him the option to pull it down if it's there. And then having a weapon like Cam Coleman, maybe that's just, firing it right to the pylon, something in the back of the end zone. And then maybe having, one of your tight ends, because most likely he's probably going to go 12. Having one of your tight ends, in the situation where they can, find a spot. So I think there's different ways to skin it, but I think we're probably all in agreement that you want to make sure that sequencing is a bit better, especially earlier in the downs, so that you don't, put yourself where you're backing yourself against a wall essentially for third or fourth down.
No, I like that, especially what you said about giving yourself options. Right. In case in that situation, in case the first option fails or doesn't succeed, then the quarterback would have different options, potentially different solutions available. But one of my favorite Sark plays on the goal-to-goal situation actually came against Georgia when they were down 23-0. It was on the 2-yard line, first and goal. It's that Isaiah Bond touchdown. Y'all remember the first one? They made it 23-6. That was a really good play. Essentially, I don't know if y'all remember, I'm sure y'all do. I'm talking for folks that are watching. Essentially, he stole the concept, the corn dog concept from Andy Reid. Essentially, it's the corn dog concept from the 2 Super Bowls against Philly and against the 49ers. I was at that Super Bowl. And they beat them with the same concept. You bring in you go jet motion from usually a stack formation or a bunch formation from the outside, and you go jet motion. All right, like you're going across the formation, but you end up with a jet they call it jet return, a jet whip return motion. And then as soon as the ball is snapped, you can either throw it quick to that guy, or you can wait for the pick to develop from the outside receiver and then wait for him to come free. And obviously Kansas City did it most times, but Texas did it to Georgia. And based on how that corner is going to play it, either you're bumping the motion, which means everybody on the defense bumps over. All right. And you're going to zone it up, or that DB is going to travel. And if I travel, I got to get ahead of that motion. I can't have him go across the formation and be ahead of me, because then you can easily just pitch it to him, or they can just jet sweep hand it off to him. That's still my guy. So I got to get ahead of him. And if you're DB trying to get ahead of the motion, then you're going to sprint to get through the traffic. And as soon as they jet return motion, you're going to be chasing. And go look at all the DBs that travel, they chase. And if it almost works as an option to beat man end zone, because you zone it up and they just bump, you can still turn it to a quick pass and wait for the pick to clear your guy, and you can win a one-on-one. And it's the red zone. You're on a 3-yard line, the 2-yard line. Texas was 2-yard line, first and goal there. And Georgia DB got caught chasing, target to motion. I love corn dog in the red zone. Don't know why people don't do it more often. Andy Reid told you it works in the Super Bowl twice, back-to-back to win it for him. And Sark had worked against Georgia. Sark should have ran it more often. We didn't see it enough. I think corn dog works in the red zone, baby. It works.
I'm with Marcus in terms of whether it's a run pass option or Rob, what you're talking about.
No, it was an RPO. It was an RPO. It ended up being an RPO the way they ran it.
All the cheat codes that make Sark's offense special. When the field compresses, that's where you need all your cheat codes, is when, you can be more predictable. It's easier to be more predictable in the red zone. The defense, they've got a lot more margin for error at that point. Like, that's when you need the motions and the shifts, and you need, manipulation at the mesh point. Like, I just think you're hamstring yourself. Like, I went back and looked at the failed 4th and goal against Ohio State, where Arch called the quarterback sneaking in. Like you said, Rod Sark he's taking the blame for it. It wasn't a good call. But again, I go back to second down. Like, you had 1st and goal at the 9, and you were in a 3-by-1 formation, which you're spreading everybody out. And what'd you call it? You called a quarterback draw. Well, okay, the quarterback draw, at least that's going to be a delayed action, so you're giving yourself a chance. The second down call was you ran a quarterback power to the left side, and you pulled your guards. Well, if linebackers are reading keys, they're just coming screaming downhill. And when you pull your guards, especially, probably should have done this with your offensive line setup last season, you're inviting penetration whenever you pull. So I don't like how much Texas pulls their guards in short yardage situations, but you just make yourself easier to defend. And especially when you've got Arch's legs involved, like, I want to make the most use of Arch's legs in those situations, and at least give myself the option that whether it's hard play action and a rollout, or whether it's a true read option look, I want to give Arch the option to, hey, if the throw is there, you can throw it. But if you do need to take off and run, you trust Arch's legs enough and trust his decision-making enough to where he can go make that play for you. Now, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I don't want Arch Manning taking a bunch of unnecessary shots in games like Texas State or UTSA where it's uncalled for. You should be able to be a little more conventional in games like that. But if you've got, 3rd and goal against Ohio State, yeah, that's a situation where I think even Arch understands you got to go with your best weapon, and your best red zone weapon as of right now. We'll see how it evolves with Cam Coleman, or I know CJ's put out some numbers about Raleek Brown and short yardage, but as of right now, going into the season, Arch Manning is your best proven commodity you have in the red zone and short yardage situations.
And one of the things to your point too, Jeff, is, and I like what you were talking about as well, Rod, whether it's a bunch formation or however you want to get to it. I know I mentioned 12 earlier just because we've seen Sark do that a good bit, but it's probably, in his best interest, at least for what we know about this offensive line to this point, in theory, right? To not get in that, to break tendency that you've talked about at times, Rod, so that, look, maybe they prove us to be different, but, kind of the way I'm envisioning this offensive line at this moment is to be very athletic, but not necessarily a mauling unit. Right. And I think what you may hear from some traditional Longhorn fans is, why don't we just line up and run it? Well, probably, again, things may develop differently. We may end up learning, more and more as we get into, fall camp. And then by the time the games get here. But as it, currently stands, I don't know if they're just going to line up in the red zone when things get that condensed in some kind of jumbo formation and just run it down someone's throat, right? So doing what they can to, force the defense to at least consider some different options, and, even think for a split second, because you know as well as I do, Rod, whether it's from a linebacker position, a DB, a split second in the red zone, and that's a touchdown. Right. Yeah. So anything that he can do to make them, just pause, even briefly, even in their mind, would play to their advantage.
That's another reason, Rod, when you go back to some of Sark's better red zone calls, go back to 2022. They had a 4th and goal against Iowa State in a home game. You just ran a simple whip route with Xavier Worthy. To Marcus's point, that's why I love the whip route in the red zone and down around the goal line, because your margin for error, now you're putting the emphasis on the defense. Now your margin for error as a defensive back is so small. One wrong step and you're beat. And especially when you've got, the fastest man in the history of the combine running the route, it helps. But I love running, whip routes or concepts like that down around the goal line.
Yeah. I mean, that's what essentially that corn dog plays is the whip return. And it does. And to Marcus' point earlier, he ran that play out of 12 personnel. It was 12 personnel, 2x2 set with 2 tight ends. Another play I like that Sarkis already ran on the goal-to-goal situations. Honestly, the Nick Townsend jet sweep handoff versus A&M. It's beautiful. It was 12 personnel, double wing, 2x2 set. He motions Nick Townsend and then turns it into a jet sweep handoff for a touchdown. He walked in untouched almost, because the defense was fooled because you had a lot of misdirection in that play as well. And then of course the play fake. So they assumed Texas running power or something like that. And nope, Texas ends up running tight end jet sweep handoff that was also breaking tendency because we hadn't seen it all season long. So how the hell was A&M gonna be prepared for it? So that's one of my favorite goal to go. It was second. It was the 2-yard line, 1st and goal. First and goal is when he has some of his best stuff, when he's right there inside the 5 on 1st and goal. That's one of my favorite plays. And here's one of my favorite plays I think Sark should steal. And Longhorn fans know it pretty well. So I want to get stuff that Longhorn fans at least would be familiar with. You remember West Virginia, and I know you like this play too, Jeff. West Virginia beats Texas.
Oh, gosh, yes.
42-41. 2-point conversion, right? They line up in empty formation for the 2-point conversion. And they're on the 3-yard line, I believe. They go 4x1, single receiver to the short side of the field. They got a triangle trips, like a triangle bunch trips, all right, to the wide side of the field. And then they got the tight end flex. So it was a 4x1 set. And it was such a beautiful play. Quarterback, they hike it to him in empty formation, and he fakes like they're going to throw the screen. So it was a package play. They had a fade up top in case he wanted to throw the fade on the one-on-one. He liked it. They had a wide receiver screen, all right, to the bottom, and then they had the tight end kind of just running to the sticks, like he just ran around a little hitch route there. And then they had the QB draw set up too. So it's like it's defending 3 plays in one. Defense ultimately stressed. You cannot defend all of those options and concepts at one time. And ultimately, they didn't account for the QB. Well, Texas didn't account for the QB. QB draw, walks into the end zone. Beautiful play design. You should steal that play for Arch Manning, baby. That should be Arch Manning special right there.
Yeah. And you know what I love about that play too? I'm going to give Tom Herman some credit because Tom Herman stole that play.
Exactly.
That was in 2018 because you go to the 2019 season, Texas used it. I think it was a 2-point conversion against Oklahoma State where they came out in that 4-by-1. They had kind of that diamond bunch up top, and Sam rears up and throws a quick screen to Rojo, and Roshan's got blockers and he scores. The next year in Lubbock, they ran it when they needed it. And again, it's a 4-by-1. And to your point, Rod, the receiver on the single side, he's got to read the DB. So basically, if he's playing inside leverage, I'm going to run a fade. If he's playing head up or outside leverage for whatever reason, then you're going to run a slant. And Sam had options. Brendan Eagles ran a slant, and boom, you got it. So that's why I love that play, because you do have a lot of options. So yes, if Tom Herman can steal it, Sark can steal it and use it. I don't know why more teams don't use that formation and that play. Thank you, Dana Holgerson. I don't know why teams don't use it more down there.
I mean, all of this is where we're talking about options. We're talking about putting defenders in conflict. And when you have something like that gives you so many different options, all it takes is one person on the defense to screw up. And it's really hard throughout a game and in high leverage situations like that for you to try. I mean, these are still young men, still different guys that are going to be developing on the defensive side of the ball that you're playing against. It's hard to keep that kind of eye discipline to your assignment, your scheme, your alignment, the whole nine. And when you have a guy, that will have the experience like an Arch Manning in a situation where he can make the best decision, I think it's awesome. So, yeah, I'm with you guys. I'll be really interested to see how many different looks he gives, for Ohio State on film against, Texas State in the very first game, right? Yeah. Just kind of see what does he just throw out there so that there's things that they have to consider.
Yeah.
The play that I would call, though, Rod, that I have seen Sark run, and to Marcus's point, it's about putting defenders in conflict. You go back, they had a 1st and goal at the 6 against Vanderbilt. And I think the plays we're talking about, what they all have in common, they were later in the year when Sark really started to figure out, okay, I'm going to have to trust Arch's legs. I got to buy into this. I got to have stuff where he does have run pass options. They kind of they flow it to I think it was into the boundary side. So to the field side, it's Arch on a rollout, and you've got CJ Baxter running kind of a little shallow route to the pylon. And you've got one, I think it was a corner out there, and the corner's got to make a decision. I call this the VY awakening. Like I saw Greg Davis use this in the Rose Bowl against Michigan, where he had VY on a rollout, and the Michigan defender had to make a choice. If I come up and take Vince Young, he's going to dump it over my head to David Thomas for a touchdown. If I stay with David Thomas, it's Vince freaking Young. He's going to tuck the ball in front of the score. So you're screwed either way. And that's what you did to Vanderbilt. You put the defender in conflict. He's got to figure out either I come up and take Arch, and he's going to dump it over my head for a touchdown, or I stay with CJ Baxter and Arch is going to run it in. And Arch, to Arch's credit, he let it play out long enough to where eventually the defender came up and gave him just enough of a window to where he dumped it over his head and threw it to CJ Baxter for a touchdown. So if I'm Sark, I go back. You probably got to mix up the formation and the personnel and the movement, but I love that play call. If it's executed right, it's damn near unstoppable.
Great conversation, Jim. Yeah, conflict, misdirection, and like Marcus said, solutions. Build in multiple solutions in case your guy gets in trouble. I want to thank our friends over at Prize Picks. We appreciate them for sponsoring this edition of On Texas Football. Folks, Prize Picks is fantastic. If you're not watching sports and picking with Prize Picks, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. Now, every possession matters. Every at-bat matters. Every shot, every pitch. You're locked in from start to finish. You're not just watching. Hey, you've got a little juice in it. And trust me, it's a lot of upside to it for you as well if you're picking the right way. No deep dives, no complicated nonsense. You're picking more or less on player stats, points, rebounds, hits, strikeouts, whatever you're already watching. Build your lineup, submit it, and you're good. It takes maybe a minute or less. What I love most about it is you have options. You can mix and match, right? Your favorite player, is really hot on your favorite team, you could roll with that. Then you can mix and match that with basketball, baseball, golf. Stick with what you love or mix and match across different sports. That's the beauty of Prize Picks. There's so many different ways for you to do it, and so much fun that you can have while doing it. Trust your gut, lock it in, and now every single moment actually means something. So Prize Picks available in all 50 states, including right here in the great state of Texas. So if you haven't jumped in yet, now is the perfect time. Download the app. Just use the code HMA. All right, download the app. Use the code HMA. Play $5, and they'll give you $50 in lineups instantly. That's the code HMA, and you can play 5 and get 50 instantly. It's really simple, really easy, and it's a whole lot of fun. Friends over at Prize Picks, available in all 50 states, including right here in the great state of Texas. So now's the perfect time for you to take advantage of it. Thank you to Prize Picks. We appreciate them. Play smart, play responsibly, play Prize Picks. Thank you, Marcus. Appreciate you taking the time. Thanks, Jeff. Great stuff as always. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes. He's the real MVP for Matthew and for Jeff and for Marcus. I'm Lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Until next time, hook 'em horns.
Hey guys, Blake Monroe here from Coffee and Football. YouTube thinks that you're going to like this video right here. And if the algorithm knows ball, it's a good one. So go check it out. And then don't forget, hit that like and subscribe button.